Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. One of our most listened to podcasts, one of our most popular podcasts was with our good friend right over here, Dr. Raymond Prior. I always mess that up. I always say Mr.
Raymond is just
So we've been blessed. We're here at the Academy. We're here in House Bay, and we've been blessed to get Doc to come in for a couple of days and spend some time with us. So we wanted to all sit down and shoot something together. Raymond, welcome.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be here. Appreciate you.
So we've been talking off air a little bit about the struggle. And that can be all-encompassing, right? That can be golf course. That can be life, business. You know, one of the things that you and I have been talking about a lot is how kids growing up, need to feel some struggle. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about, and then how in your situation and your experiences and what that struggle looked like. And just from a psychological standpoint, how do we deal with it? What does it look like? How do we grow from it?
I think you use the word struggle too often. We think of that as a negative word or like a bad thing. There's not an Eastern philosophy, a Western religion, a scientific theory in terms of psychology anyway that doesn't acknowledge and embrace struggle. It's part of life. If you want to get better at something, whether that's a sport, a knowledge area, a relationship, whatever it is, it's going to include some struggle. There's going to be some heartache. There's going to be some rejection. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be loss. There's going to be failure involved. And I think too often we look at those things like they shouldn't happen or that it's a bad thing if they are. And so just overall, I think it's important for us to just, I don't want to say embrace struggle, but understand like it's required for growth, period. And we don't have a choice to not struggle in our lives. There's not a human being that's ever existed that hasn't struggled. And if you're going to play this game, struggle is baked in. The game is literally designed to try to make you struggle physically, strategically, psychologically, etc. And so to your question about young people, if we as adults don't let them struggle and allow them to continue to work through it, they don't learn the skills or the resilience and even the relationship with struggle that allows them to move through it and learn from it. Think about a toddler learning to walk. If every time it falls, you pick it up and don't allow it, it'll never figure out how to pick itself up and actually learn to walk. There's not a child in the world that doesn't learn how to walk eventually, given their physical abilities, if you let them figure it out. And of course, we might help them and encourage them along the way. But if you pick your kid up every time they tried to walk, they would never learn to walk. That goes for, kids learning how to deal with conflict, how to deal with learning and not maybe doing so well in school, all the way to the struggles that come with playing golf. It's important for us to support people and help them through it. But there's something to be said about we're doing things for them that take the struggle away, that then essentially we don't build up a thick enough skin to be able to deal with it later on in life when we have to deal with it on our own.
How do you think that with golfers, do you think we try to avoid, we're almost, you from a professional playing career, do you think you were almost predisposed to trying to avoid struggle at all costs?
Yes, totally. I laugh because we spend our whole life trying to be the best we can be and skirt trouble and struggles and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Every time I struggled, it was pointed out to me by somebody, and I didn't need anybody to point it out to me.
That's right.
I was well aware. I was in the middle of it.
What's interesting to me, like if we're in the business world, take golf out of it, and we have a bad day from a business perspective, we're not going to change our life, right? It was a bad day. Had a rough day at the office, right? You're going to typically go to sleep, have a cold beer, and wake up and be ready to go the next day, right? Typically. If it's a long-term pattern, obviously some things change, but one bad day on the golf course could literally change your life if you're weak enough to allow it, right? It can. I was a panicker. I've talked about it all the time on here, right? But that's the scary thing about golf is one bad shot. Think about what 12 at Augusta did to Jordan Spieth he may not say it did, but like that one result, 10 at Augusta for Rory. He snap hooks it, should have won that tournament, he doesn't. And there is such a long-term effect from one bad swing, one bad shot.
That's where I struggle with the mathematical equations in the game. I'm just not Mathematics says you should go for it all based on whatever the parameters are.
Yeah, blackjack rules.
And I personally think there's a gut feeling that has to be dealt with. Because if you don't deal with that and you make the mistake, you're going to live with that forever. And I really liked what Cam Smith said in the interview after this last weekend about his shot on number 12. I just made a bad swing. And, we make bad swings because of various things. Maybe a puff of wind came up that he felt, and he felt like he needed to get on top of it a little bit more. Whatever. I don't know what it could have been. But a lot of things cause a bad swing. But if you get so marred into what you did there, it looked to me like he put it aside. That's what you'd be trying to get him to do, right?
Yeah, so when we struggle, which we will, like you said, we make mistakes. Struggle can include the physical and emotional and psychological effort that we have to put into something. It can also just be we experience setbacks and failures, rejection, bad shots at terrible times during golf tournaments. When we get bogged down in them, that's also what we're trying to avoid. So we certainly wouldn't want to take out struggle from people's lives, because we want people to be able to learn that when I struggle, how do I work my way through it? And one of the ways that we can work through it is learning to experience a setback and move forward from it, and learn and move forward. When we don't give people the opportunities to struggle, it's difficult for them to figure that out on their own through their direct experience. And then it becomes really susceptible for us as soon as we are struggling or experience a swing like that in a moment like that, to then try to revamp and redesign the whole thing.
Yeah, because at that point, the brain's trying to protect you from it happening again, right? Especially at the most critical moments. And that's the part that's fascinating to me when we struggle or when we fail at Greg Norman. I keep going to the Masters, all these Masters thoughts, highlights keep popping up into my head. But Greg Norman at the Masters, I remember Hunter Mahan flubbing a chip at the President's Cup, and that really messed with him for a while. How do you get your clients, your students to overcome when it happens? Obviously, we can slough it off at the range, right? But when it happens at the biggest moment, how do you get them to overcome it?
Well, acknowledging it is the first part of it. I think we can try to sweep it under the rug, try to ignore it, and there's no such thing as a short memory. I know we use that phrase in sports a lot, like you got to have a short memory, whether you're playing golf and you make a mistake, or you're a wide receiver and you drop a pass. Like, our brain is not designed to have short memories, especially for negative events, because it needs to remember negative events to keep us alive. Yeah. Us acknowledging them and addressing it as a failure helps our brain go, okay, well, it wasn't that big a deal. Because as soon as we start pushing events away, like I'm just going to try to ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, our brain's logging that as this is a problem, right? This is something to be avoided in the future, therefore gearing us right toward it. And it's encoding it more into our memory long term. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we're really aware of how we're explaining it to ourselves. So we've talked about this a little bit before the first time I was here. What we're finding with people who are really resilient is that they are optimists. And by optimists, I don't necessarily just mean they see the glass half full. It's why they see the glass half full. People who are optimists see the glass as half full, not because they think everything's great all the time, because they only see positive consequences to their actions and performance, or that there aren't any negative. It's that they explain the events and experiences of their lives as only as long-term as they actually are. No more pervasive. Pervasive is a fancy word of saying, I'm only going to give it the amount of ripple effects it actually has, and I'm not going to add any to it. And they don't make anything more personal than it really is. And so if I told you, you dump one in the water at 12 at Augusta during the back nine in contention, that sucks. It's going to last a while. People are going to talk about it, but it's over when the round is over, which doesn't mean you don't feel it, doesn't mean you didn't like it, doesn't mean you weren't satisfied with it, but it only lasts as long as it needs to last. It's not a reflection of your overall game. It's not a reflection of how well you actually handle pressure in the long term, or all the ripple effects. It doesn't mean that your wedge game is terrible, or it's just, it was a shot that I didn't hit well. And I don't take it personally, meaning I'm not saying that I'm a bad golfer, that I can't handle pressure, that I'm a choke artist, etc. I'm assessing it as how well did I actually execute my skills, my effort. Then it's only a short-term, temporary, non-personal problem. People are pretty resilient when they're facing difficulty, and it's only as long as it needs to be. It's only as widespread as it needs to be, and we don't take it personally. We're far less resilient, and struggle and failure and rejection boggles us down, and we get stuck in it for longer when we explain things pessimistically, which is we make them longer term than they really are. We make them way more widespread than they really are, and we take things really personally. So for example, if you dump one in the water on number 12 at Augusta and you go, my whole round is ruined. I'll never have a chance of competing for the Masters or any other tournament ever again. I'm making it much longer term than it really is. I would say I can't handle pressure, period. I've now made the ripple effect of that mistake apply to things that it doesn't actually apply to. And number three, I'm a bad golfer, or I'm not a championship golfer, and I've made a personal conclusion about something that is not personal. If I told you those are the two ways you would interpret the same event, we have no reason to be resilient with a pessimistic explanatory style, because once you go, this is really long-term, really pervasive, and really personal, the next conclusion I'm going to make is, well, why would I keep trying? Or there's nothing I can do. Right. Whereas if we see something more short-term, more localized, and more non-personal, that goes, well, now I can go fix something, or I can change something, I can make an adjustment, and we deal with our current reality closer to as it is. When we explain things pessimistically, we're making it worse than it really is in a subjective way that we actually experience directly, and that can keep us stuck in struggle for a long time. So if we let ourselves struggle and we acknowledge our struggles and our mistakes and our failures, but are mindful of how we are explaining them to ourselves, that's why we see the glass as half full or half empty, even after really difficult events or some of like the hardest moments of our lives.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we would call this, for those who are listening who are interested in the psychology, these are what we call our explanatory styles. Optimistic is short-term, localized, and non-personal. Pessimistic explanatory style is long-term, pervasive, and personal.
So,
like I said, I wished I'd have known you.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
If I can just add to that, with that, what we're looking for with those two optimistic explanatory styles is a different level of acceptance. So we've talked about acceptance before, really important.
Next, yeah.
Acceptance, to be clear, doesn't mean we like it, doesn't mean we're comfortable with it, doesn't mean we're satisfied with it, doesn't mean we're stuck with it forever, and it doesn't mean we don't care. It means we're dealing with our current, past, or future situation without preference, meaning as it is. Human beings are pretty resilient when we deal with our current reality, or our reality in general, closer to truth. The pessimistic explanatory style starts to add a lot of stuff that is just subjective, and it gets farther and farther from reality in a way that is really threatening. Hence, the level of acceptance comes really, really far down, and we get avoidant. Hence why we try to avoid those moments in the future rather than, well, if this happens, it's a short-term problem. If it happens again, it's still a short-term problem. It's not a huge ripple effect, and it's not really about me. It's about how I played. Then you get to that same situation, and it's a non-threatening event, and then you can actually play freely the next time you get there. But if I explain it pessimistically, I'm going to worry about the possibility of it, and then when I'm actually there, I'm in threat response mode. I'm not in go play freely mode.
So with Cam or any other player that had the situation happen on 12 at Augusta in contention, having a chance, especially in Jordan's situation where he was leading the tournament. So a year later, 2 years later, you're working with said client, and he's got a 1 or 2 shot lead heading into the back nine of Augusta. Mm-hmm. He knows it's coming. It's so deeply rooted in our brain to say, avoid the water, avoid this happened. It's going to pull up. The memory banks are there, just like you said. You can't avoid it. And that's the one thing that talking to guys like you, some of the other sports guys we've had on, sports sex guys, like the brain is doing it to protect us.
Right.
How do you get them to get through this? How do you...
It starts with your level of acceptance.
And that's where I was going to say, you have to accept that you may hit it in the water again.
You might. It's in sport, it's a bit of an outdated, archaic model of the way you approach success and avoid failure is to just make failure unacceptable and something that I'm just not even open to in any way whatsoever. And what we're finding with that is that actually creates a situation where now we are multitasking between trying to avoid what we don't want to happen and pursue what we do. And this is really important because we can't do both at the same time for 2 reasons. 1, we suck at multitasking. Human beings think we're good at multitasking. We are not. And the second is, if we are faced, our brain has the option of pursue what you want or avoid what you don't. It is designed by its nature to choose avoid. No matter how much we go, no, do this, your brain goes, no, I'll take over. Safety first. Hence why when we're in those situations, if our level of acceptance is low and avoidance is an option, our brain will choose avoidance. And that's really important because that takes us out of being present. The power of acceptance is that we deal with our current reality and it grants us access to the present moment. If we don't have a high enough level of acceptance, we're trying to avoid a future that we don't want. And then hence the multitasking, and then we're not actually present when we're doing it. And that plays a really important role in a skill sport like golf, because that creates brain activity that actually starts to disrupt our physical motions. Specifically, it disrupts the sequencing of physical motions, pretty important in golf. It disrupts our ability to apply the appropriate amount of force, speed, right? And in a sport where you can hit it too far or too short, also really important.
On a hole like 12.
On a hole like 12, which is really narrow.
Right.
And it also makes it more difficult for us to visually and attentionally be focused on an external target, whether that's an intermediate target, a target in the distance, a place where we're trying to land a ball on a green, or a putting line. For the reason being, our brain is looking for ways to avoid what it doesn't want to happen, not focused on what it does want to happen. And so without acceptance, I mean, the optimistic explanatory style and the acceptance that it creates, credible acceptance, is what grants us access to the present moment. And it is at the heart of like the research around what makes people resilient and present and high performing, high functioning, happy, healthy human beings revolves around acceptance. For that reason, there's just so much that revolves around it that allows us to be, and it's not trying to avoid discomfort and uncertainty, which we cannot avoid. So to your question, acknowledging it, acceptance of it, and acceptance of the possibility that it might happen again is what allows you, when you come to that moment again, to have that memory without it being something that necessarily prompts a defensive response from you, where you can go, yeah, that happened, possibility that could happen again, and because I'm open to that and willing to accept it, which again doesn't mean I would like it, would want it, be satisfied with it, doesn't mean I don't care, it means I would go, okay, and then my brain can go, well, if that's okay, I can prioritize what I want to do without trying to multitask between avoidance at the same time.
It's so interesting to me because you talked about acceptance a lot, right? And we always viewed it a lot of times as acceptance after the shot happened,
right.
Like accept whatever our belief was or our commitment level was. But to me, and we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago about 18 at Sawgrass. It was right after Sawgrass, and it was like, I would have never in college, high school, mini tour, would have never stepped up on that team and been okay with it in the water. Yeah. Never. Like, you just, a good player, you can't do that. You got to avoid the water at all costs.
Let me clarify. Not okay with.
Sorry,
accepting of, and that's different because makes it sound like either I don't care or that I would like it to happen.
I don't want to hit the water, but like for me to make a good committed swing, there will be a percentage of golf balls that go in the water. There has to be. If I hit 100 balls there, I'm gonna to perform my best. I'm gonna hit a couple in the water, right? I never viewed it like that, so I was going to avoid the water at all costs, and then that brings way right into play, and it brings more left into play.
Yes, it does.
And it's even hearing you say it, it's a freeing thought, right? Like it frees you to say, "Let's go make a free golf swing and let it go." Your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I've been on the tee on 18 when I needed to hit it.
I was going to say, there's one of us here who's actually played that hole,
and I never thought about hitting it way right. I never thought about hitting it in the water. All I thought about was, I have got to be right down there. Yeah. That was the only message I sent to my brain. And, I mean, Freddie started telling me that as we walked off the green on 18, how you're the best driver here this week. You know that. He said it no less than a dozen times from the 18th green. From the 17th green to the 18th tee. And I, without hesitation, pulled the driver out and aimed it right down the left-hand side. I never dared it to go in the water, and I never dared it to go right. I said, that's where I want it, right there.
Yeah.
And
so you were not multitasking.
I was not multitasking. Yeah. That's the point. That's what I kept sitting here thinking. I wasn't multitasking. Yeah. And it's hard to get to that point, though. I'll have to tell you that because, and I talk about it a lot, by reducing the size of your world. If you take in the whole world, if you take in everything that's around you, you start multitasking because you're aware of everything that can happen wrong. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. This is a hard game. It's a hard mental game. Yes,
but Pete Dye, I don't know if he majored in psychology in college, but visually he knows how to create uncertainty and doubt. Right. And if you do that and you're not aware of that, or you're prone to then going, if you have a low level of acceptance playing golf courses that are particularly visually challenging and create doubt, that's a really tough course to play for you, because ultimately what you're going to do is he is creating a situation where you are being triggered to be defensive visually all the time.
So I'd be curious to know, all the people that don't like Pete Dye courses, what they are.
Yeah.
From a mental standpoint.
Yeah.
Which category do they fit into?
And imagine that a Pete Dye golf course is not very enjoyable to play if you have a very low level of acceptance, and then therefore you're playing it through anxiety.
Right.
Any golf course would be less enjoyable.
Well, that's where yips come from.
For sure.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've all, I'm not afraid to admit it on here, everybody watching here, I've had some yippy moments in my life. Not a whole lot when I was playing the tour, but since then, where I don't play all the time, been pretty yippy with those wedges around the greens. That's why I admired what Scotty Scheffler did this last weekend. I thought he was unbelievable around the green.
Well, and I think, anybody that's played the game at a high level for a long time has dealt with it before. You see Bernhard Langer putting with a bunch of different types of putters. Jim Furyk went to a bunch of different. You start to see that kind of breakdown. Doc, my question for you, going back to leading up to 12. So for our listeners at home that are leading into a short-sighted chip shot that they don't like, talking about yips, or a tee shot that they've always played bad. They've always played a hole 13 bad at their home course for their club championship. Self-talk. What can we kind of write down little things in our notes or something to just kind of get us thinking correctly? We've preached, before we talk to you, we've preached process. What are we trying to do? What's our next most important shot? Or our next question is, where's the target? Going kind of Gio Valiente on us, target. What are we trying to do? Can we process the negative, the anxiety, out process, maybe not over process? Or can we self-talk our way into being a bit more free and being accepting?
You can, and again, the key with that is that your inner dialogue has to be credible. If it's not credible, if you're telling yourself, just focus on the process, but underneath that, you're going, you better not blast this thing wherever, again, that has more credibility. Where I think is more helpful for people in those situations, that increases the credibility of their inner dialogue, or their self-talk, as you would call it, is not trying to convince yourself that you're comfortable, everything's going to be certain, and everything's going to work out, but to have an inner dialogue that's more geared toward, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? And then also considers what you would need to tell yourself to have a high level of acceptance, right? And if your level of acceptance for a shot is really low, then either you have to increase your level of acceptance to hit it freely, or you've got to adjust where you're going to hit it, right? If I'm playing number 12 at Augusta and my skill level, aiming over the bunker is a bad idea, right? Because my skill level might not allow me that. Even if I'm really accepting, I don't have that shot in the way that the pros do, in which case I've got to adjust. Or if I've got a difficult shot, a difficult chip, I might need to not play a lofted club, etc. But acceptance has to be there, presence has to be there. How people's inner dialogue sounds to get them there can vary, but I would never try to help my players develop a sense of absolute certainty or total comfort over a shot that isn't comfortable or certain to them, because again, it doesn't have any credibility to it, and our brain will favor what's most credible, and if avoidance is the most credible thing, then it will favor that.
Well, and we talked about on here in the first pod with you about nerve versus anxiety.
That's right.
And we've got to be okay. We'll perform better with nerves.
Yes.
And so not being comfortable is okay. Yeah. It's just, again, how can we make that free committed golf swing?
That's
how
right.
can we let go of future outcomes, as you put it? I like to say there's no strings attached to the golf ball. Just send it.
I'm sitting here thinking, what does the word permission mean to you?
Permission. Yeah, it means acceptance. So it's funny you bring that up. I was talking with a tour player yesterday, and we were just talking about what does it mean for you to be able to credibly give yourself permission to miss? Because if we have permission to miss, we also have permission to pursue, right? Because if I don't have permission to miss, that means my acceptance level is low. I'm favoring avoidance, right? And so permission to fail is what gives us permission to pursue what we want, and this is the key, Hal, without a guarantee that it's going to work out for us. That's what stable confidence is built upon. Stable confidence, by definition, is permission to pursue what we want, not knowing how it's going to work out. And if you're waiting for certainty, which is I have to feel like I know how it's going to work out, or I have to feel comfortable, which when we're nervous, or if you're playing in a competitive golf tournament, the likelihood is very low, our confidence is by definition going to be unstable. It's almost as unstable a formula as I need a result of a shot to tell me how confident I need to be. It's an unstable formula, but that permission is vital. It's another way of saying acceptance.
It's critical. It's critical. I've used that all the time with people. I had a guy in here this morning that just will not, he's always, well, if I do that, what's going to happen over here?
Right.
So he's never going to proceed forward.
Right.
Because he's looking at the possibilities that could come from it rather than making a change that might be positive.
That's right. Yeah, there's always some uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't have permission to experience uncertainty, we're always going to be trying to control the future, which we can't. And then again, now we're multitasking between time frames, right? So,
And to me, driving range is control, right? Like that's where we're trying to get comfortable and chasing comfortability, right?
I think the driving range, just from a psychological standpoint, is just an environment where stable confidence is not required. Like the situation that you're in is conducive to acceptance and groundedness because results don't matter. And there's really no bad shots. I mean, you can hit a bad shot, but there's no penalty for it. Then there's no reward for it. So it's a situation, it's just like playing a practice round. People play far more freely in practice rounds because the situation, because scores don't count, you get to hit a shot twice. Like nobody's really making judgments and opinions about your performance from when scores don't count. It's conducive to acceptance. It's situational acceptance and groundedness, or situational acceptance, which allows us to be grounded easier. As soon as score counts, you walk to the first tee, and it's on record. The situation is no longer conducive to acceptance. You have to generate it on your own, which is what's difficult for us. You said it's hard. It's really hard to have a high level of acceptance when if you hit a shot, there is negative consequences for it. It is temporary, but it's not a second long. It's going to cost you. It's not so pervasive, but there is some ripple effect. If you hit one in the water, there's a water ripple and on your scorecard. And there are some personal costs involved. If you're going to go play golf on TV, you're going to be criticized if you make mistakes. You're going to be praised if you play great. There's financial risk. There's social risk. There's all of these things exist for us.
Well, and
so acceptance is harder when those things are real.
You said on TV, but even club championship, like some of the worst fears are guys going and shooting $1 million in a club championship
100%.
and getting ridiculed by their friends, right? Like obviously Hal's stakes were higher, but I think the average Joe feels the same or even worse pressure than probably those guys did.
We, as human beings, are evolutionarily designed to value other people's opinions. And so when we're performing in front of other people, we're going to feel that, whether we're playing in the Masters or whether we're playing in a club championship. His is, again, many of the stakes are higher, but that doesn't mean it registers any different. To what he felt playing in some of the most competitive golf tournaments in the world might be exactly or less than what somebody else feels on a first tee in front of other people.
They were probably more anxious than he was.
It's very possible, right? And so, to your point, acceptance when things count, that's why it's really valuable, because it's hard to do, and that's what also makes it so liberating when you play with it. Because you have created it when a situation hasn't necessarily allowed you to do that, which is why it's such an advantage for people who can create that and why their confidence is far more stable than somebody who's relying on, do I feel comfortable when I step up to the shot, which you may or may not.
Do you think that, one thought that popped in my head there is like the average Joe's playing in 2 or 3 tournaments a year where Hal was playing in 30. Do you think that them having 3 Super Bowls a year versus Hal having 30 tournaments a year, do you think that makes it even harder to do this because they build up these events so much and they have to wait another 3 months before they get to kind of do it again?
It can. Again, depends on how you interpret it. But what I would say is one of these situations that makes it most difficult for us to be accepting is when we're running out of second chances. So if you only have 3 tournaments a year, it's not that different. I've talked to a couple of mini tour players. They're going to get into either an LPGA event or a PGA Tour event this year just by an exemption or qualifying, right? That's one chance. No second chances. And if you take advantage of it, you could get your tour card, you could get extra status, you could do a bunch of things.
Yeah.
The situation is not conducive to being accepting unless you go in there with no expectations and you don't really care if you're playing with house money. But the bottom line is they all want to play on the top tours in the world, in which case I have a chance right now. And if I hit poor shots and my score suffers for it,
and
it's going to suffer.
And to me, that's a perfect analogy between the range and the golf course. Because the golf course, you get a whole bucket of golf balls.
Yes.
You get a ton of second chances. So again, you hit that one bad shot, you put another ball down and hit it good, and that's the fake confidence.
Think about why the back nine of a major is. People say the back nine of a major doesn't start, or a major doesn't start till the back nine on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's because that's where you have fewer and fewer chances. On Thursday, if you have an round, you got Friday to try to make the cut. You got Saturday to try to move up, and then even Sunday, you're like, well, I got a front and a back.
Yeah.
By the time you get to the back, that's where rubber hits the road, in which case then the situation is not conducive to acceptance. You have to generate it on your own. And if you do, you can play freely being nervous. If you can't, you'll play more defensively being anxious. And it's tough to play well being anxious.
I was nervous the whole way.
I believe it.
Would you say edgy? Like just kind of on edge?
Just hyped up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an elevated state of, we would call it arousal in psychology, where physiologically we are elevated.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I won the PGA, I was nervous as I could be.
Yeah.
It was negatively affecting me on 12, 13, and 14. And finally on 15, I put my head in a towel and I said, look, this is going to define you if you don't stop this. We have to get so laser focused from here in on what we want to do on each shot, which is what you've been saying.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally, I said to myself, okay, when I brought the towel down, the only thing I want to do is drive it in the fairway right here. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've been sitting here listening to this. The whole distance thing has really bothered me. And I wondered why. No offense. I'd love to be as long as you are. But it's bothered me because, I had boundaries whenever I was playing golf. I didn't try to go as hard as I could because I knew it brought on things that I didn't want.
Yeah.
It didn't allow me to be as laser focused. I knew where my speed limits were. I didn't drive too slow so people would run over me, but I didn't drive so fast that I ran over people. So that's kind of the way I drove the ball. I've always talked about golf as like driving a car. And it allowed me to be known as one of the straighter ball hitters on the tour. Well, I wasn't one of the longest, but I wasn't one of the shortest either. It was kind of a laser type thing for me. I don't know. I'm sitting here. I don't even know how any of this relates. I don't even know why I'm telling it, basically.
I'm curious. Hal, tell us a little bit about, what is it about the kind of this quest for distance that we're seeing in the game now that doesn't fit for you? Or at least, you use the word bothers you. For
me, it doesn't bother me for the game. It bothers me for me. I got to stay within me.
I see.
And, every kid that comes in here, I want them to be as long as God allows them to be, whatever that is. Let's find out what that might be, but we don't need any more than that. We're not going to, distance has no end. When are you as long as you can be? Do you know? No one knows that. And
it's kind of what we talked about Bryson, but it's kind of what's hurt Bryson because he wasn't ever comfortable with where he was at. Right?
Exactly.
And you start keep training, when's enough.
Well, and I got comfortable with how far I hit it. So I wasn't really looking for more until we started measuring it. I can remember they had tour stats. Each week it'd be on the bulletin board. Who's in the top 10 driving distance, who's in the top 10 total driving, who's in the top 10 accuracy, who's in the top 10 greens and regulation. It was all posted every week. And, I didn't care about distance. And I cared about total driving because total driving meant you were pretty good at both. Well, I knew that if I was decent in length and I was decent in accuracy, that was going to work for me. And I don't know, I just, there's no end to that. There's an 18, you can't hit more than 18 greens, that's all you're playing. That's my point. And I knew every time I hit 18 greens, and I did it quite a bit, actually. But I guess then if I could have said, well, I need to be within 10 feet of the hole on all 18 greens. That changes things, doesn't it?
Right.
So it's a different set of parameters for you with this philosophical shift from what you played your best at. That kind of, there's some friction between, not in general for golf, but for your game specifically, a search for just more distance for the sake of more distance, or even if that had improved your golf, would have taken you away from the things you did your best?
Yeah, well, I guess the reason why I bring that up is because most of the people listening on here are not trying to play the tour. They're trying to just be decent at their local course, basically, or they're a high school golfer hoping to play. So, so many people are dealing with trying to be longer. And we got architects that continue to build golf courses that demand that. We've got golf balls that don't want to get in the air because they're low spin golf balls. And if I can't keep it in the air, well, then I'm dependent on a firm golf course to be able to hit it long. The average guy doesn't understand all that. I don't think, do you think they do?
No.
And
Well, and the other thing too, that the one that gets me is now they're all hitting their irons as far as they used to when they were younger, and their driver doesn't go anywhere. I'm like, yeah, because now your 7 iron's a 5 iron.
yeah,
It's your old 5 iron, so it's also tricking them
Because the
into thinking,
lofts are stronger.
lofts and the
Yeah.
tech in the head allows the ball to get in the air a little bit more. So
I just don't think. I think there's some understanding lost out there from the guy that's playing at the local club. He doesn't understand all of the things that are working against him on what he's trying to do.
I see. Do you see for younger generations of players than you, so whether that's people who are on tour now or even your college and high school players, do you see areas where when you see them moving in that direction, I get the sense that distance is one of them, you feel like it's actually more detrimental to them than it is helpful for their development overall?
That's a tough question.
I would say for me, it's age dependent. If they're the younger, no, they can push for a little while. But like if they're 18, 19, 20 in college, and a lot of it just what are their low scores? What scores have they shot? Are they hitting it everywhere? There's a lot of kids that want to come in here and hit 7 iron 210 yards, and we'll both. If we gave the same kid the same a lesson on the same day, we were going to both tell him, like, dude, you got to tone that down a little bit. Like, we've got to control this golf ball a little bit. And for me, it's all about the tools, right? Like, hitting it long is a hammer, and we want to control the speed a little bit, to have a wrench and to have different types of wrenches and to have some power tools and to have all those tools, right? Because as you play and how obviously, and you guys listening, that you don't get your stock numbers all the time. So there's got to be some speed control. Look at how many off-speed shots Scheffler had to hit at Augusta and all that stuff. So to me, it's you. Well, you said it on the lesson we did where we were talking about cruising speed, and I think if you're going to play at the highest level, you've got to have adequate speed. Functional speed was what I was coming up to when we were talking about speed earlier. But I don't think that you can go full on max and be the best player you can be. But I think you've got to make sure you hit it far enough to play number 11 at Augusta that's at 520 now. And if not, you're going to have 240 in. Like, that's not a recipe for success out there. So there's a fine balance, and it's gearing more towards speed, but you also have to be functional and have to be able to hit the center of the club face and hit the right distances that you're trying to hit.
So I think agree with you that age has something to do with it. So every kid that comes in here, we want them to be absolutely as long as they can be within reason, to where their speed is under control and they can reasonably hit it where they're trying to look at. But I give a lot of lessons to a lot of older people in here, and I'm trying to get them to slow down. I'm trying to get them to shorten their golf swing, and it's working against everything they're thinking to do that. And I'm sure you see the same thing. They say distance doesn't matter to them, but it's all bullshit. Excuse me for saying that, but it does matter.
Yeah.
And they can't move to the next level because that is the underlying current within everything that they do. I've got to be longer. I can't sacrifice anything.
So correct me if I'm off course, I get a sense that part of your friction with the distance is not the distance itself, it's the rigidity around it, that it must be the focal point, that other things become sacrificed for it to the point where it actually, like you said, the chase for distance is disrupting your ability to develop the tool set that you're talking about that is required to play adjustable, flexible golf.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I couldn't have said it better myself. I've been trying to for 15 minutes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you for putting it into those words for me. But we fight that in here. I mean, I had 2 people in here today that was an issue with.
Yeah. Well, and Doc, we've talked about your golf swing a little bit, right? And you've got quite a bit of speed. And one of the things we see all the time is when they come in and they're, man, Chase or how we're not hitting very good. We're struggling with this and that. Okay, so we ask them to slow down and make an exaggerated motion just so we can reprogram motor patterns, all that stuff, right? How far to go? It doesn't matter how far it went.
Right.
Did you do what we asked you to do? What was the objective? What process? All that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But instead, it went 10 yards shorter. Oh, I can't do that. I can't give up distance. It's like, okay, well then go back to what you've always done and what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you could address in here, I think this is really powerful. I can get people to make a lot better golf swing as long as their ball is not there. If they'll just make a practice swing, they'll do. And I say, okay, I want you to max out on what I'm asking you to do. They will love what it puts up on the screen. They'll love it every time. The minute I roll a ball over there, it changes everything.
Yeah, there's a result involved now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you've talked about your process focus. If you take out the possibility for a result, people tend to focus more on the process. And then also we have a hit instinct as human beings if you put a ball in front of us. But it's no different than if you watch people playing around, especially amateurs, they make a practice swing. You're like, man, that's a pretty fluid swing. Then they step up to a shot and it's different, right? And then, of course, if you add anxiety into it, which is I'm worried about where this thing is going to go or how far it's going to go, now our brain activity has disrupted our physical ability to make smoother and more efficient swings in the first place.
Well, and research has shown us lately that the club is squaring at like 3,500 degrees per second at impact. So like this squaring of the face to try to hit a ball where they want to hit it is what adds to all this, all us being mental head cases and being result oriented and reacting to the ball and hitting at the ball and all that stuff, right?
Well, results matter to us as human beings, right? Yeah. It's difficult. One of the questions I had with somebody I was talking with yesterday, they were asking about how to improve practice for amateurs. And for me, the first thing that they can do to improve their practice is to use the result of the shot and move it way down the priority list of metrics that you're using, right? Like where the ball actually finishes while you're practicing, whether that's block practice or you're doing drills or whatever, is far less important than are you actually doing the thing that you're trying to do and then waiting for the result to catch up by doing the right things. Right. And when we put the result way up here, it's not that the result doesn't matter, but when we're practicing, we put it so high up that we're missing all the stuff in between, and then we start trying to hit it where we want it to finish up instead of actually doing what it is we're trying to do. I don't want to throw names around, but you were giving a lesson to a very prominent golfer just a little while ago. He did not seem concerned with where the ball was going at all. He was simply concerned with what am I doing in my swing that is going to eventually allow me to hit the ball the way that I want to, and then I will worry about where the golf ball is going. It was one of the most, he probably hit 25, 35 golf balls in an hour, and it was one of the most efficient practices I've seen and lessons I've seen in ages, simply because he was partially not at all involved with the result, and he was more interested in how do I swing this club better, not how do I make the result better this fast.
So I say this all the time to people in here. If I can keep your brain right here on this green carpet, that's one of the things that works against us is because God gave us the ability for our brain to go places.
That's right.
And it goes places all the time.
It does.
And if we can keep your brain right here in this little 3-foot circle, we've got a better chance of getting you to do what will produce the kind of outcome that you want.
What I would even say with that, Hal, is to prioritize this, right? Our brain has the ability to go all over the place, and that is a wonderful ability for us. It will do that more often when we prioritize something that's not in front of us, right? So when we make being present and focusing on what's in front of us when we're doing it the priority, our brain is far less likely to jump that far. And then when it does, we go, well, that's not where I want to be, and we typically refocus and narrow our focus sooner. And like you said, when you're trying to learn something and get feedback on it, that is super important.
So let's go into some of your players and talk about this prioritizing idea. I'm always fascinated with this scale of golf being mental, golf being physical, and if you talk to whoever you talk to, if you're talking to a nerdy golf instructor like me, I'm like, it's all physical,
it's
not
all
really,
physical,
but right, it's fix your golf swing, right? And if you talk to sports performance guys and sports psychologists, it's all 100% mental. It's always a mental issue. You're shaking your head, and I love that because it can't be 100%. It just can't. How do you deal with your players when they say, Doc, I'm where I need to be, all the stuff mentally we've been doing, we're locked in, but the performance, the results still aren't great? Sure. When does it become, all right, you need to go see another instructor, or when does it become like it is a physical issue and because the balance and those questions I think are so important.
For sure. I'm going to address that in two pieces because you asked like what percent is.
Yeah.
The percent is irrelevant. The order of operations is what matters. And I say that because whether our psychology is 1% or 99% of golf, which who knows what it is, just depends on what you're teaching. Everything is filtered through our psychology. We can't do anything physically without our brain allowing us to do so. That includes our involuntary stuff. So for my clients, I don't care what percent of their performance is psychological. I want to make sure whatever percent it is allowing you to do what you want to do physically. Sure. So we'll just, to the second part of your question, we've talked about this a little bit earlier. High performance in general, if we're kind of just breaking it into a very general landscape, is a marriage of confidence and how stable it is and your level of competence. If a player is telling me and we have checked off the boxes, I'm present, My level of acceptance is really high. I'm committed to the shots I'm playing, all and choom, and it's still not adding up. Then it's an issue of competence, and we got to go figure out how to get better. That, by the way, is a real fear for a lot of high-performing people, because we don't like the idea that we're not as good as we think we are. And so what can be dangerous is if we go, or not dangerous, but scary for people, is if I get out of my own way completely and I find out I'm not as good as I think I am, that can be a very scary finding for many people, in which case then you have to address your psychology around, well, what if I'm not as good as I really think I am, which is an opportunity to get better.
Sure. Quick follow-up on the competence. And you kind of answered a little bit, but would you agree that competence is technique and skill set? Like it's kind of both of those?
I would kind of put it into a broader category. And again, I'm kind of narrowing psychology as the confidence part. And it's what impacts our psychology is not just our psychology, right? Like if you go hit 20 shots and they're all amazing, your confidence is going to get boosted. It's just not a very good primary source because it's unstable. So there are many things that impact our confidence and our ability to be present. And like we just talked about acceptance. Some situations make it easier for our psychology to be higher acceptance. Competence in that I would include like your physical skill level, your ability to adjust and use those skills differently in different situations. In golf, your course strategy, like that is part of being a competent golfer, being able to manage a golf course. All the stuff off the course too. Like there's a reason everyone's wearing Whoop bands and how competent of a recovery do I get between rounds? How well am I eating? What's my fitness level? Right? What makes you more competent at hitting the golf ball farther if you're looking for distance is how strong are you and how flexible are you? Yeah. How much speed can you create? There are a lot of things that go into each, but if we're talking about, trying to narrow, well, where can I get better? It's important for us to go, okay, well, is my psychology allowing for that? And then what areas can be improved or changed? Okay. And in competency as well. Like if you're saying I'm playing really freely and I'm still hitting a hook, it's probably time for a golf lesson. Yeah. Or if you're saying I'm playing really freely, I'm hitting good shots, but I'm running out of gas, then your fitness.
And how I feel like we talked about this in a couple episodes ago. I was trying to get out like what your struggles were mentally, and you seemed to didn't have, like, looking back, yours wasn't too many times where your brain got in your way. It sounded like you were fairly locked in and committed most of the time to what you were trying to do. Would you agree?
Well, at times,
ebbed and flowed a little bit.
It ebbed and flowed. When I could get myself laser focused on what I was going to do, and most of the time my struggles helped me get laser focused. Yeah. And I think that's really important. Some of the biggest highlights that I had in my life came off of some real low times. Mm-hmm. Like 2 weeks prior to winning the PGA, I lost a 6-shot lead, and I didn't think there was anybody in the world that spotted me 6 shots. I mean, no one could beat me like that, but yet it happened on national TV. Yeah. So that struggle caused me to laser focus.
Can I ask you? Yeah. What did you do? So you lose a 6-shot lead. That is ample opportunity for you to just absolutely undermine your own confidence, to doubt yourself, to do all these things. How did you respond to that even allowed you the chance to play well, in the PGA Championship, well enough to contend, let alone win?
How did I respond to that? I didn't sleep a wink that night. Yeah. I'll tell you that.
So you felt it.
I felt it. Yeah. It hurt bad. I felt like I jumped into a fire. Yeah. And I got up the next day. I had an outing that I had to play at Virginia Beach, and I shot 62 the next day because I had to prove to myself that, that wasn't me. That was somebody else, which that did a really good job of proving that. I came back home and I said, okay, I felt like my swing got too long and I hit too many hooks. So I went to work on that. And by the end of the week, it was all on the golf course, a little bit on the driving range, mostly on the golf course. And by the end of the week, I knew I was ready. And I told my dad wasn't even scheduled to go with me. And I said, I tell you something, we're going to put this to rest right now. Yeah. I said, I'm going to win the PGA at Riviera. And I said, not only in that, I'm going to lead it from start to finish. Got out there and paired with Lee Trevino and Lanny Watkins. I'll never forget that because I love Lee and I always tried to watch everything that he did. And I opened with 65, leading the tournament. And it never looked back until I got to the 12, 13, 14. I had 4-shot lead, and I made 3 bogeys in a row. And I thought, here it comes again. And
So the thought did pop up.
yes,
Yeah, okay.
the thought popped up.
Yeah.
Hey, we cannot let this happen again. Now, what do we have to do to save this? That's when I got laser focused. I said, all I can do is drive. The only way forward is one shot at a time.
Yeah.
All I can do on this particular shot is drive it in the fairway.
Yeah.
I can't deal with what's going to happen next. I'll deal with that when I get down there.
Yeah. So you grounded yourself in those moments.
Hard as I
Grounded
can.
meaning being present and said, what's in front of me?
I got in that 3-foot circle right there.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's it. And I wouldn't allow myself back out of there.
Yeah. So if I'm kind of recapping from, we talked about struggle. You experienced some real struggle, a setback, of losing a 6-shot lead. You felt it. I didn't hear you say I tried to ignore it and sweep it under the rug.
No, I felt it.
Okay, so you felt it and allowed yourself to feel it.
Right.
Then it was, I'm not going to let this be any longer than it is. I'm going to go figure out what I need to do better or
Right.
get better. And then I'm also, there's a part of it where you say, I'm going to go show myself that I can do something different.
Right.
Yeah, right on. Makes sense.
Well, that's why I was sitting here thinking about this when you were talking about all that earlier.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, that's exactly the ripple effect.
Yeah.
What everybody else thought. That has a big bearing on this. And, I had to get in that 3-foot circle all the way around.
Will you talk about, you at the highest levels of performance, criticism is the background music to success. And there's a level of scrutiny and eyes and praise, by the way, that isn't as common in a lot of areas of our lives. Can you talk about what that experience was like for you, what worked for you, what didn't, the times maybe you got wrapped up in it, the ways you were able to know it, but not let it infect what it is that you're doing? Can you just tell us about that a little bit?
Background noise is always going on, basically. And, I listened to the people that I trusted the most, that I knew loved me. But there was always somebody else saying something, It's easy to get caught up when people are praising you.
Yeah.
That's the easy part.
Yeah.
But when people are criticizing you, that's what hurts. I can't say I dealt with the criticism very well. The way I dealt with criticism was to retreat.
Yeah.
And, I was always a little bit embarrassed by praise. It put me in a spot where I wasn't comfortable. I don't know if I didn't feel like I deserved it or what, but it was uncomfortable to me. I asked Byron Nelson one time, I said, what were you really trying to be? I was interested in more than golf, And he made the statement to me. He said, I wanted to be the best Christian I could be. I wanted to be the best husband I could be. I wanted to be the best golfer I could be. And I wanted to be the best man I could be. But he said, I never put golf first. And that was interesting to me because I think everybody out there that wants to be first, they think they got to put golf first to be first. And, I was guilty of that.
Yeah.
And all the noise that's going on around you, being able to control how you deal with that noise. And especially now. As you and I were talking about earlier, we're living in a global world. You can get in touch with everybody who's criticizing you just by lifting your phone up.
And praising you.
And praising you both.
And you can see it right here.
You can see it right here, right here. I felt like my whole life it was right there in front of me, but never like it is right now.
Yeah. It's a different world when it comes to the access we have to other people's opinions about us and the things we do.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. You had mentioned something in there about the people closest to you, that you put your trust in them. How big was that circle for you? And if you're comfortable with it, who was in it? Where when there's all that outside praise or criticism or expectations, who are the people that you use the word retreat? Like, who are the people that you retreated to?
The people that I knew to tell me the truth.
People who are honest with you.
People that were honest with me. But that's a whole different can of worms right there because, I'll throw my dad out there. He's still alive. He doesn't listen to the podcast, I don't think. So anyway, I thought everything my dad told me was an absolute truth. He knew it as his truth, but it wasn't absolute fact, basically. But I took it as absolute fact. Tried, tested, proven to be absolute. as a father and as a grown man and everything else, I know that's not true. But it was a long time before I actually had really come to grips with that. I have actually seen where psychologists have written that a man doesn't become a man until his father is gone, because he's still making decisions based on what his dad would think. And I certainly have fell victim to that. And, I think we talked earlier, this retirement thing for me has really been difficult. I don't know where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing and where happiness lies. And, it's difficult when you've lived a life. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier, I was happy with a hotel room, a bed, and a bathroom. That was my life, and a TV. I needed a TV too, but I didn't need anything more than that. I knew I had the golf course the next day. I mean, I got to where I pick up fast food on the way home. I didn't even want to go eat because I didn't want to listen to the noise. Because someone's going to say something to you that fit into one of those two categories. They're going to either praise you or they're going to criticize you, and they may not directly say it, but you feel it.
Yeah, there's a tone to it. Oftentimes, even a comment, "Hey, you played great. Oh, you lost a couple on the back." Like, well, okay, great. So it's praise, but it's wrapped up in feedback.
Yeah, and as much as I hated that, in some ways I miss it too. I mean, finding the replacement for that.
Yeah, I think it's difficult too because I don't know that there is a replacement for that, and like we have talked about it before. I've worked with clients in a lot of other sports who, when they leave that sport, there's a space that's not there that can't be replicated, and part of the challenge with that is there's not a replacement for it, and you have to, or what options we have available to us to explore. Well, what do I want to fill this space with, not as a replacement, but as something different, and can be as meaningful or something meaningful to me in my life, but replicating it's really difficult. Like, how are you going to replicate the top levels of golf, or walking out of a tunnel on a Sunday if you play in the NFL? Like, there's no replication for that. And I don't mean to say that other things aren't great or fulfilling or better, but that is a very unique feeling that is difficult to replicate in other. I mean, there's a reason why people at the highest levels, they retire and then they go seek high performance in something else. And they're looking for that competitive spark, and sometimes you find it, and sometimes you don't. And some people need it. Other people find happiness and peace and fulfillment in other things. But when you take that thing away and you've built your life around it, like, there's a space holder there.
Sure. So I'd be interested to know what you think about this. A lot of people think that those really bad shots stand out in your lifetime forever. In my life, that's not the case. I've hit really bad shots at inopportune times. But the shots that stand out in my mind were the shots that gave me the feeling of high.
Yeah.
A hole-in-one on 16. I made the first one at Waste Management. I made a hole-in-one there, and the crowd went nuts when I made it. That I can still tell you what club I hit. I can still tell you the way the shot looked. The bad shots that I hit in my life, they're there, but I don't have instant recall of them like that. Is there a reason psychologically that's that way?
There can be a variety of things that go into it. I think that's how long something sticks with us and can be triggered in that way depends on our level of acceptance for it and how we encode that as a memory. If you hit a crappy shot in a big moment and you tell yourself, this is the worst moment of my life, I'm never going to live this down, it's going to haunt me forever. Don't be surprised if in 20 years someone shows a replay of something, or you just see that hole again, and then that memory is going to come up. If in those moments you go, "Oof, that was a clanky shot, I'm going to move on to the next one," and it's not a big deal, or it doesn't have to be any bigger a deal than it needs to, then what happens is we start to encode more memories that are the ones that we want to remember than the ones. And even if those memories do come up, they don't have the same gravity and the same intensity or the same pull towards us. It's just a memory of an event that didn't go the way we wanted it to, not something, again, that has to be that long-term, that pervasive. And particularly the memories that really, I don't want to use the word haunt, but can stick with us in a, man, I just can't get away from this, are the ones that we take personally. And then that sticks with us. But we build memories in a variety of different ways, but how we actually experience that event directly based on the psychological framework that we are experiencing it through, will depend very much how we see it later. Now, the great news is we can alter that. So there's a variety of different studies that show you could take the worst moments of your life, and I'm going to exclude like legit real trauma. But let's say it's golf related, where you hit a terrible shot at a time that was just not good for you, for your golf game, and view it through a different lens. That memory starts to change and it becomes less triggering, or when it gets triggered, it elicits a different response for us. And it's a good thing that we can do that, because a lot of our lives have ups and downs, good memories, not so good memories. But if we are really pay attention to how it is that we are explaining those events to ourselves, the lenses through which we're seeing them, and the meaning that we ultimately give them, that's going to determine how we actually directly experience them. And I don't want to make that sound like it's easy, but it is doable. Yeah.
Doc, I have a question for you about, you use the word competency, so let's use technique, skill set. We'll say that's my side of we have a student, and that's my side of the student. Mm-hmm. Obviously, your side's the psychological side. We talk all the time, like, you don't ever have full control of your golf ball. They're going to have them flow through great. Do you believe that you can have full control over your side? And I guess my second question or follow-up question to that would be, do you think your side's easier to get to a level and maintain the level? Or do you think this side's easier to get to maintain? Meaning, obviously, when we see Tiger make the runs that he went on in 2000, his competency, his skill set side was 9.5 or 10, right, and his psychological side was at 9.5 or 10. And that's when you see Scotty Scheffler win 4 out of 6. Do you have an opinion on which one's more difficult to get to that 8, 9, or 10 level? And do you feel like you have to work on both about the same? Like, I know there's a lot of questions there, but it was just something I was grounding on.
A little bit of apples and oranges, but not that different of apples and oranges. Addressing our psychology is what I call our inner work. It's an ongoing process. If you really want to develop your psychology and train it in a way to allow you to be great at something, and by that I mean long-term development, performing under pressure and being grounded in it, and also having a more fulfilling relationship with that thing, that is an ongoing process. So the idea that I'm going to sit down with somebody, we're going to go and check these boxes, and then I'll see when I see it. Not very likely, for the reason being, just like our physical skill sets, they are influenced by a variety of different things. And our psychology is not necessarily 100% controllable. If you're having a great day, you're grounded, you're present, and I give you terrible news, your psychology is going to change. Yeah. Now, it's going to depend on your psychology, how much it changes and what it changes to. Yeah. But if our psychology was 100% controllable, we'd just snap into flow state. And it's not. We can be grounded, we can be accepting, but our overall psychological state, or specific, depending on whether we're actually performing or if it's our larger life, is impacted by things outside of our control. If it wasn't, then we all would never deviate from the things we're doing. We'd all get better this fast. We would never get distracted. Like, our brain psychologically is designed to try to take in more information. And so there are a variety of things outside of just us internally that can impact our psychology. The key with having psychological strength is to be able to be aware of those and to adjust accordingly, and how our psychology is structured, the skills that we develop within that, and the relationship we have with when our psychology changes is really what's far more important. Similar to, like, I mean, if you have a legend in the game over here still grinding on his game later in life, that's not a skill set that you just set and forget, right? So
we're going to ebb and flow through competency, skill set, technique. We're going to ebb and flow through the psychological side of things too. I mean, I like to tell players all the time, like, this game, there's no consistency in this game. You're never going to be completely consistent.
No, I would say consistency is a bell curve, right? Or we might, in golf, we might say a dispersion.
It's going to slide.
Right. There's variation within it. Nobody's a robot. Our psychology is the same. Yeah. One of the things that players, if they're, Raymond, I'm really struggling. There are a couple things I always ask them. Like, first of all, what is your mindfulness practice like? Tell me what your inner dialogue is sounding like. Have you been doing the things that we've been talking about? And just like if someone comes in for a lesson, they're like, I've been hitting it terrible, the first thing you're asked is, what have you been practicing, and how have you been practicing? And if we're not doing the work, it ebbs and flows more, and it's less, there's more variability that we aren't taking control of. And the same goes for our psychology. Like, if you're not training your awareness to be present and in a non-judgmental way, then don't be surprised when outside things and internal things create more deviation for us. And by deviation, I mean our emotional state gets elevated faster and more intensely, and then also our focus goes all kinds of different places, and then our confidence is going to be less stable in that way.
It all needs awareness. Your golf swing needs awareness and work. Your mindfulness, all that stuff needs
awareness. Is the first line of information processing for everything about us, physically, psychologically, neurologically. Without awareness, either something's happening, and if we're not aware of it, it's just happening, and we're hoping it's in line with what it is we want.
Yeah.
And if we do have awareness, the type of awareness matters, because if we bring a judgmental awareness to it, so in this case I would be talking about like the awareness of our own thoughts or awareness of the events around us, it's not just being aware, but the type matters as well. If we're really judgmental about it, we can make ourselves feel worse, and we don't do very well when we make ourselves feel worse. We don't have to feel great, but when we layer emotions on top of ourselves by being aware of our thoughts and feelings or our mistakes, and then compounding them by judging ourselves for them, that would be, I shouldn't be feeling this is a bad thought, or I should be playing better, etc. Now we're adding to it, and ultimately the ebbs and flows get, if we're talking consistency, like it starts to go like this. There's nobody in the world who is completely consistent. What we're trying to do is, can I gear my psychology and develop my skill set to where it gets small enough that I can be really functional with it, and also have enough flexibility that I can use it, maybe not exactly how I intend all the time. That being, I'm trying to hit a straight shot, but I might need to hit one that doesn't sometimes.
So I'm curious. You've worked with all sorts of people, highly successful people, and they all have qualities that set them apart. Are they aware of those qualities as much as you are aware of what they do? Sometimes,
and my job is in part to help them be aware of that, and I'm only aware of what people can tell me. I'm an quote-unquote expert on psychology, but I'm not an expert on any given person's psychology unless they grant me access to it. But a lot of my work is helping people. Really what my work is about is, can I help you gear your psychology in a way so that the things you're good at, you can do more freely? Because if you do them more freely, you're probably going to do them better.
Right.
And also, can I help you gear your psychology in a way that is going to make the struggle of getting better. And I don't necessarily mean feel better, but you're actually going to get better at it because your psychology is not getting in the way of you trying to avoid struggle. Yeah.
So we talked a bit about title in this episode about struggle. 2 questions kind of for you to kind of wrap this up. Number 1 would be, how do we make practice harder? We talked about that a little bit with a player earlier. That I had a drill, and then you went up to my drill and made it really hard. And then your drill is a little sadistic, but and then the second bit I want you to go into, from a parenting standpoint. You talked about letting kids walk and how they stumble and whatnot, but like this idea of how it's healthy to kind of push them to their limit and then see kind of how they react to it.
Yeah. So to your first question, one of the difficulties with practice in any performance is that we know doesn't count. So there are things we can do to bring it closer, but bridging that gap altogether, we haven't figured out how to do it.
Never going to be the same, right?
For golfers, one of the things you can do if you're really trying to create pressure in your practice is play worst ball and do it with multiple balls, to the point where you want to get to the point where when you're standing over any shot, you're feeling some pressure to have to hit it well. So with the player we were talking with earlier, it's 3-ball worst ball, which means if I'm going to hit a shot from a place where I really want to hit it, it means I got to hit 3 good shots in a row. And so we're creating a situation that is not conducive to acceptance, right? And being grounded, because it's very easy for me to start thinking about the 3rd shot I hit when I'm on the first one. And if I hit one, whatever, it's really difficult to be accepting of the fact that I still got to hit 2 more balls and I'm probably playing that one. Or I might have to play one that's worse, right? Amen. It's a little bit sadistic, but what it does is it provides us opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to be accepting and be grounding when it's difficult to do so. In terms of, for parents, we just say it's a general rule of thumb. The less we can do things for people when they are capable of doing it, the better. So essentially, don't do anything for your kids that they can do for themselves. If they can carry their own golf bag, carry their own golf bag. If they can schedule a lesson have them schedule a lesson. When we start doing things for people, they don't have to struggle to figure out how to do it, but also we're robbing them of the opportunity to go, I can do hard things. And that is, it's like self-belief is not just, I think I can do it. Real self-belief is, I think I can handle hard things and I can deal with them. And we rob that of people if we don't let them try and fail and help them along the way. But trying and failing is like the best thing we can do to learn. What we want to do is push people to just outside of their current skill level for practice. Like the most efficient practice for us, and this includes golf, is we have somewhere between a 60 and an 80% success rate for something. Whether that be like I'm doing a motion in block practice or maybe even a target drill, where I'm going to have to really focus and buckle down on what I'm doing to be successful, but it's not so far out of my current skill level that it's impossible, right? Like here's the danger of perfection. Like the success rate is not attainable, and therefore it becomes very easy for us to give up as soon as it's not that. So we want something that's just outside of our current skill level, and then let them struggle and see how they go. And if they need help, then we can provide some feedback and some information, or maybe even teach them something. But if they can do something on their own, let them do it. For the reason being, they learn to struggle, they learn to deal with failure and success. And when they do succeed or execute the way they want to, or do something that they weren't sure they could do, we give them the opportunity to go, I can do hard things. And that is where resilience is built from, because resilience is not everything's easy for me and I walk through life. That's essentially the formula for entitlement. Self-belief and hardiness and resilience goes, I'm pretty sure I can do hard things. I'm not totally sure, but I'm pretty sure. And then we try hard things. And when we try hard things, we get better. And if as adults, again, when we just do stuff for people, particularly young people, we are robbing them of that opportunity. And they are everywhere if we let them have it. We were talking about you're teaching your son to ride his bicycle, right? Yeah. If you hold the back of his seat the whole time, he can't ever figure out, I'm pretty sure I can balance this thing and ride. Exactly right. But also, if you just shove him down a hill, he's going to eat it, and then he's going to hate riding his bike. Yeah. So if you hold it long enough, let him ride, and you're kind of near him, and then he goes, I can do this. That's what happens when we let people struggle. And he might fall a couple times, but you're not putting him in a situation where he's going to eat it and bust his teeth, but you're also not doing it for him. And now he has the opportunity to go, I can ride a bike without you having done it for him.
It's one of those things, I keep going back to this thought of like, and it's not the best situation, but when like a person loses parents at an early age or something, it has to be so self-reliant. And a lot of times they come out of it now, psychologically, they're a little bit, it's not the ideal way to do it, but they had to become so self-reliant that they become very successful in what they're trying to do.
Tough environments, typically people come out of them in two directions. Either it's too tough and they flounder in it, or they come out really tough on the other side. Even if we look at some of the highest performing groups in the world, which are usually high efficiency military units, they are really tough. Yeah. But they are not so far out of where people are that it's easy for them to quit, or it crushes them altogether. Right? Like they are pushing you as hard as they possibly can
to that edge
before you break, and then that threshold gets higher, and then they're going to push you higher. Yeah. And then at the end of that training, like there's no doubt why people who come out of Navy SEALs training are like crazy tough people. Yeah. The environment has helped them train that, and then of course they have a value system and a level of acceptance in a zero-sum game that most people can't really fathom. Right. So
I think that's what Tiger's dad did to him. I think he pushed him to the bending. He bent him. He didn't break him. And I think Tiger had a love for his dad that, so
it's such a balancing act between healthy and destructive.
It can be, right? Like, and there's, for parenting is really hard. Like, just for the record, it's really hard because finding those lines aren't always really tangible. They're not always black and white. And how far is it pushing them too hard versus when are the times where they actually need, to maybe even be coddled a little bit, and navigating that as a parent is really difficult. So the general rule of thumb is if somebody can do it on their own, let them do it and let them struggle with it. But there are times as a parent where you got to swoop in and do parent things. And there's also times when it's like, get out of your way so that you can do something.
Figure it out. There's a time to coddle and hug. There's a time to let them figure it out.
That's right. And if we're talking psychologically, that beginner's mindset is really, like, we learn at a crazy fast clip in a beginner's mindset. It's essentially just a trial and error mindset with high levels of acceptance and no worry about what happens. Just curiosity about seeing what happens. Yeah. There's no adult intervention in a beginner's mindset, right? So the more that we can let them explore like that in a lot of things and then only intervene as needed, we're giving them a chance to figure things out on their own. And then when they don't know, they typically come to us and say, what do I do here? And that's a great opportunity for us to teach and learn from them too.
Well, Raymond, I said at the beginning of this that we were blessed to have you down for a couple days, and you were a rock star in our first episode, and you were again today. This was great. You're incredible at what you do. Keep doing it. I'm glad you've been you're a part of our team now. Like you've been an asset to us, even just conversations I've had with you, and thanks for sitting down with us. It was awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you both having me. This has been great.
I don't even know how to say this. You're ahead of the game. That's all I'm going to say. You say it so eloquently and so easy to understand. And I hope everybody out there is grasping what he's saying, because it's rock star status.
Thank you both for having me. Awesome opportunity, and I hope we can do it again soon.
We're definitely
and I appreciate
going to.
the compliments
We will.
as well. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Be the right club today. Yes!